Hey, Legal Eagles. The age old question of how to choose the right law school. Currently, there are over 250 different law schools in the US alone, and choosing between them can be daunting. But today we're going to go over the main concerns that you should consider when deciding between law schools, so stick around. There are a number of factors to consider when choosing between law schools, and no one size fits all. But the first consideration is, what job do you want when you graduate from law school? Certain jobs require a pedigree, and others not so much. There's no way around it, but sometimes law school rank matters. Lots of people pay attention to it. If you want to be a Supreme Court clerk, and then parlay that clerkship into a big firm litigation job, well, that requires the highest law school pedigree that's out there. You need to go to a top law school. Other jobs, on the other hand, like working for a small or medium sized law firm, often don't require as much pedigree or a top law school rank. Some jobs don't require really any pedigree at all. And in fact, sometimes you can get into a district attorney job or a public defender's job without the same kind of pedigree of a top law school that would be necessary to become a big firm litigator or a Supreme Court clerk. So before you think about how you want to get there, think about where you want to go. It's important to know the destination before you choose the right path. If your ideal job requires a top law school, well, then you'll want to aim for a top law school. The next factor I would take into consideration is the geographical location of where you want to practice. Certainly, it's no surprise that top law schools probably open up the most options. But often, if you want to work in a specific geographical region, there are certain regional law schools that are considered just as good as many of the better ranked law schools for the purposes of that particular geographical location. Certain regional law schools punch way above their weight for the region that they're located in. If you know you want to end up in a particular location, you might go to a law school in that area. The alumni network might be well connected in that area. You might be able to get more networking opportunities in that city or that state. So in certain circumstances, a regional law school can have advantages over a higher ranked law school. So for example, if you knew you wanted to practice in Los Angeles, California, you might consider going to Loyola or Pepperdine in the LA area. And while they're not the top ranked law schools in the country, they punch above their weight in the Los Angeles area. By the same token, however, going to a much higher ranked law school might open up even more opportunities in a wider geographical location. And frankly, if you go to some of the top law schools, then it shouldn't be too difficult to get a job in any particular location. But that's always something to consider, especially if different law schools offer different financial packages and financial aid as well. Sometimes going to a regional school can save you a lot of money, but you have to weigh the pros and cons versus going to a better ranked school that might open up more doors outside of just a particular geographical location. And sometimes people decide that they don't want to stay in a particular city or state and they want to move to somewhere else. Going to a higher ranked school can sometimes open up those kind of opportunities. Which brings me to the next factor that you should probably consider when deciding between law schools, and that's how much are you willing to pay? Unfortunately, there's not much difference in terms of the public or rack rates that you see from different law schools, and the amount that you pay doesn't really correlate to the rank of that school. In fact, it's often inversely correlated, where the better schools actually charge less than some of the lower ranked schools, and some of the for-profit schools charge the most out of everybody. But there's really not a huge amount of variation between the published rates of the highest ranked schools and the lowest ranked schools. But that doesn't mean there's no difference at all. Generally speaking, public law schools are going to charge less, often tens of thousands of dollars less per year than their private counterparts. But the biggest difference comes in the form of financial aid. Just because the published tuition is high doesn't mean that students are actually going to pay that much. There's often a huge amount of competition amongst law schools to attract the best and brightest law students. So different law schools offer a huge variation in financial aid, which can sometimes result in scholarships from a few $100s to several $1,000s or even full rides and full ride pluses. It can result in a huge difference in the amount that you pay at the end of the day when you go to law school. So often you have to make a decision between going to a higher ranked law school or going to one that's going to pay you more money to go there. And when you're talking about law school, where tuition alone can cost $50,000 a year, not to mention living expenses, It's not surprising that law students often graduate with over $200,000 in law school debt alone. So, getting a large financial aid package can have a huge effect on your quality of life when you graduate from law school. Another factor to consider is, do you want to go into a specialty in the law? What most people don't know is that law schools teach basically the same thing, especially in your first year and usually into your second year. And unfortunately, no law school really prepares you for practicing as an attorney. No one feels ready to practice when they graduate from law school. And that's true whether you go to the number one law school in the country or the number 100th law school in the country. It's shocking, but they all teach basically the same thing. But a handful of schools really excel in a few specialty areas like tax or entertainment law or law and economics. So if you know that you want to go into one of these specialty fields, generally the kind of fields that require an LLM or a master's of the law, then you might consider going to one of those schools that really excels in that area. But outside of those really specialty areas, I would not assume that any law school is going to teach you anything different from another law school. And unless you're going into one of those LLM type areas, odds are you're going to get the exact same education as anywhere else. There aren't that many areas in which this specialty applies. Tax is the one that really comes out. So if you know that you want to go into one of these specialty fields that requires an advanced law degree, then you might consider going to a law school that has a very high-ranked specialty program in that area. The next big consideration when thinking about law schools is whether you want to go into big law. Most students think that they want to go into big law when they start law school, whether it's actually the best thing for them or not. And while it's certainly not the route for everyone, it is the route that I took. I've been a big firm lawyer for over 10 years. I've recruited, I have mentored summer associates, and here's what I think are the most important takeaways if you want to go into big law when you're deciding between law schools. If you want to go the big firm route, you generally need to go to one of the best schools in the country, the most prestigious schools. At the top of the 250 law schools in the country, there are 3 at the very top that are always changing in position for number 1. And that's usually Yale, Harvard, and Stanford. Which one of those 3 schools is ranked number 1 in a particular year largely depends on who you ask. But generally, those 3 schools are considered the top 3 schools in the country. If you're able to get into the roughly top half of your class at one of the top law schools in the country, you stand a very good chance of being competitive with the top firms in the country and getting a big firm job. Now, apart from the top 3 law schools, there are what people generally refer to as the top tier of law schools, often called the Tier 1 law schools or T14 law schools. Those are also almost universally considered the top law schools in the country, roughly the top 10%. You'll hear people talk about the top 14 law schools in the country. Sometimes it's the top 15 and sometimes it's the top 20. Really, there's not a whole lot of difference between those top tier schools. Those top 10% of law schools are schools like NYU, Berkeley, UCLA, Georgetown, Michigan, Duke, Columbia. I'm also leaving out a whole bunch of those top tier schools, but they're generally considered the top schools in the country. Even though you're in one of the top law schools in the country, you still need to do reasonably well in your class in order to get a big firm job. But if you're safely in the top third of your class at a Tier 1 school, you stand a very good chance of getting a big firm job or a clerkship. After that, I would say that there is sort of a second tier of law schools. The law schools ranked generally between 20 and 100. If you go to one of these schools and you want to go the big firm route, generally you have to be in the top 5 to 10% of your class. You have to do very well at these Tier 2 schools in order to get the most competitive jobs, because you're competing with thousands of people that went to the top tier schools, and you have to demonstrate that you are above the rest of your class. So it can be very difficult. If you want to go to a law school that is outside the top 100, and you still want to go the prestigious big firm route, well, it's still possible, but you're really going to have to differentiate yourself from the rest of your class. You really have to excel and be roughly the top 1 or 2 people, maybe the top 5 in your class, in order to get the kind of ranking that would allow you to get the big firm jobs. These are the kind of rankings and grades that are also going to let you transfer to a different school if you want to go that route. But keep in mind that big law is not all there is. There's all kinds of jobs in law, and you shouldn't assume that big law is necessarily the right one for you. You've got to work thousands of hours and it can really burn you out. So don't just assume that big law is the one and only route in law school. There's lots of different careers in the legal field, and you may not want to go into big law in particular. Additionally, when you're thinking about different careers in law, check out the data that the ABA puts out on different law schools. The ABA publishes information on each school that will tell you how successful their graduates are, what states that those graduates practice in, and it will also tell you the average income that graduates from that particular law school make. So don't just rely on generalities, but really dig in and see if graduates from the law school that you're considering are going into the kind of jobs that you really want to go into. So that being said, while everyone's situation is different, and there's never a general best law school for everyone, I do want to give you some general tips. All things being equal, I would say go to a higher ranked law school. The higher ranked law schools, especially when you get into the top tier of law schools, really open up many different options for you. And maybe a year from now, when you're a 2L, or 3 years from now, what you want out of your legal career might be completely different than what you want when you start out. So going to a higher ranked law firm, often if there's a big difference in the ranking, can really open up some different options, if not now, then perhaps later down the line. So all things being equal, you might consider a higher ranked law school. Also, again, all things being equal, you might consider going to a school that offers more financial aid. If you're deciding between schools within the top tier or within the top 3 in the top tier, and one school gives you a full ride and another school gives you zero financial aid, I would probably choose the one that gives you more financial aid. Despite the fact that there might be a 10 rank difference between school number 1 and school number 10, there's probably not going to be that much of a difference in terms of your employment prospects, and certainly very little in terms of what's actually taught at the law school. So you could do yourself a huge favor by taking money for the slightly lower ranked school, if that comes with more financial aid. And you'd probably be very happy to graduate debt-free from a top-tier law school if the alternative was to go to another top-ranked law school with a ton of debt. Often that can be the difference between zero debt and $250,000 worth of debt. And when you graduate, if you don't go into big law and you go into a legal career that pays, $70,000 or $80,000, which is the median salary for an attorney, having or not having $250,000 worth of loans to repay over a 10-year time period can make all the difference in your quality of life. Again, all things being equal, go to a law school that is closer to the geographical location that you want to practice. If you know that you want to practice in Boston, then by all means go to a law school in Boston. It's very helpful to be able to interview with a lot of firms in the area in which you're going to law school. Otherwise, the alternative might be having to fly across the country in order to do the same number of interviews or to interview with the same type of firm. What law schools don't tell you is that at the beginning of your second year, you're going to be doing a ton of interviews with firms and governmental agencies to try and line up the job that you have when you graduate from law school. And it is so much easier to be able to take on-campus interviews with the type of firms that you want to practice in the future, because local firms are more likely to hold on-campus interviews at a local law school. It's just the economics of the situation. So going to a law school in the city or the state where you want to practice can make all the difference in your second year when you're taking interviews for the firms that you want to work for in the future. So this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what you should do before law school. If you want more strategies and tactics for what to do before starting law school, download our free Ultimate Pre-Law Checklist. It's our gift to you. The link to that is down below, and it will give you a head start when you get to law school. Also, please click the like and subscribe buttons. The more people that subscribe to this channel, the more videos we can make on how to crush law school. So, did I miss any considerations that you have about choosing your law school? Are you choosing between law school right now? Have you already decided? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. And until next time, at Legal Eagle, think like a lawyer and ace your exams. Stella. The age-old question of how to choose the right law school. But today we're going to go over the main concerns that you should consider when deciding between law schools. So before you think about what you want, So before you think about